Truett used to always say, we're not just in the chicken business, we're in the people business. There's this popular saying that it's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get selected as a Chick-Fil-A franchisee. And that's about right, man.
That's Brandon Hurst. He operates not one, but 2 Chick-fil-A's. We covered everything there is to know about being a Chick-fil-A franchisee.
Do you have to be a, Christian or that is not how this works. We were able to be catapulted to one of the highest grossing Chick-fil-A's.
Holy crap.
They're taking 50% of the profits, but most people don't understand the sweet services. 2 weeks after I walked across the stage, I packed everything I own and drove 14 hours straight from Alabama to Chicago to start a brand new life, making $12 an hour. I had worked at several different concepts, McDonald's, Taco Bell, Crystals. There would be times my team would come in and find me sleep in the restaurant from the night before. When the lights come on and the doors open and you hire that first employee, everything you thought that you knew, out the window.
If you're considering buying a franchise, go to empirespod.com for a free consultation. All right, well, Chick-fil-A is known for having a low $10,000 fee to become an operator. Mm-hmm. Is that truly the only cost to get in?
Yeah, so from a financial perspective, yes, on paper, right? $10,000 upfront fee, unborrowed funds, all of that you can read on their website. But what I also tell people, especially those that are interested in the franchise opportunity, make sure that you have a nice, cash reserve, because not every opportunity that you're going to get, you're going to be profitable right away. And I think people automatically assume, it's Chick-fil-A, so build it, they will come, or open the doors and you're printing cash day one. And unfortunately, that may not be the case for everyone. So definitely, you got to have more than just that $10K.
Well, something else that impacts the profitability for any Chick-fil-A operator is they have a bit of a different structure than most franchises, right? Your typical McDonald's, Taco Bell, really any franchise of any industry is charging a percentage of revenue as their royalty. Whereas Chick-fil-A does a combo of profit sharing and as well as charging that royalty. Are you able to break down what that looks like for you as an operator?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad that you're giving me the opportunity to kind of bring this up, man. I think anytime I get the opportunity to have these Chick-fil-A Mythbusters, I jump up and down, because it's like, our business model is unique in itself. And I'm grateful that, Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, had that mindset. So let's talk about the traditional, brick and mortar franchise opportunity. Everyone knows that, hey, you pay a pretty big fee to license the brand name, right? And then traditionally, you have to go and borrow more money for the build out, the startup expenses such as marketing, the training, the equipment, etc. And then if it fails, you're left carrying the debt for who knows how long, right? And so Truett, in his mind, he just felt that, man, there's something that's about that model that just doesn't sit well with me. And hence what I like to call, engineerily reversed the franchise model at the time. And he created and crafted our operator agreement, which is essentially your $10K investment, which is the investment, what it costs today, 15% of gross sales. And then you split after you pay all of your expenses day to day. That's labor, marketing, etc. You split your profits 50-50.
Yeah. And did Truett, did he, that 15% of revenue, 50% of profits, did he come up with that all the way back, decades and decades ago?
Yeah.
So it's been remarkably consistent.
It's been remarkably consistent. I mean, I hear stories. I've had the fortunate pleasure of being with the brand since 2008, and that was as a team member. And I've been an owner since 2015, so about 7 years from team member to owner. And for as long as I can remember, it's kind of always been that way.
Yeah. And to be able to do the profit sharing, though, there's a level of visibility that corporate needs to have into the store relative to a different franchise. So what does that look like?
And I'm appreciative of that, because when people hear like, man, they're taking 50% of the profits, but most people don't understand the sweet services like the full encompassing suite services that you get from Chick-fil-A as being your partner, from everything from the type of POS systems that we are using inside of the restaurant, the bookkeeping, right?
They do the bookkeeping for you.
I got a dedicated Chick-fil-A accountant
Nice.
right? So just think
Let's
about
go.
the independent franchise operator. They're having to go and outsource those type services.
Yeah.
And all of those things are provided with this luxury suite package that I get with the Chick-fil-A brand.
Yeah, I mean, it bothers me. A lot of people refer to franchising as business in a box, but a lot of them really aren't. Like, there's still a lot of work you have to bring as the operator. But Chick-fil-A is a bit of an exception where it is much more like paying a $10,000 fee and you really are getting this business in a box.
Yeah. And when people talk about, man, you don't own anything, let's really pull back the layers of what it truly means. What are you owning in a traditional model versus what you're owning when you buy into a Chick-fil-A opportunity, right? So when you're thinking about the essence of technical terms, most times people associate ownership with the amount of equity, right?
Yes.
But what does it take to build that level of equity? And oftentimes, you don't get a chance to capitalize on that equity until there's a massive exit, right? So there's almost like this delayed gratification or reward system, right?
Very delayed.
And so on the Chick-fil-A side, which was actually very attractive to me in my early 20s, was like, okay, for $10,000 and you're telling me I can start earning profits just almost instantly, and asterisk mark on almost, because again, not every opportunity that you're going to walk into that you're earning profits from day one. But I share with people the time that it takes. I've talked to other independent franchise owners, right, of various concepts. The amount of time that is taken for them to build themselves out of debt, I've been able to take that same type of timeline, and with the profits that I share and split with Chick-fil-A, I've been able to build and invest in other ventures of my own. And so when you think about the trade-offs between those two different models, that one was just more attractive for me.
Yeah.
I didn't have access to $500,000 in assets, to go and try to pursue a McDonald's franchise or another type of QSR franchise. It's certainly not in my early 20s. And so again, credit to the Cathy family, Truett specifically, for having the vision to say, there are a lot of people that have the heart, the character, the integrity that wants access to the same opportunity. And I don't want to be the barrier because of financial means.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something interesting, which is, and I know this, most of the interviews I do are with people from the traditional franchise world. So you have debt service from the loans you take out to get them open. You probably have loans even on the equipment inside the stores. Then every 3 to 5 years, you're doing some type of remodel or the equipment breaks. So then you're financing that again. And so the actual cash that you earn as an operator of the traditional QSR franchises, it's a lot lower than, say, the EBITDA stats that you see out there, because all that's before the loans and the remodels, which sits on the balance sheet and things like that.
Yeah.
So can you talk more about specifically what you've been able to do where, yes, you don't technically own the equity in your Chick-fil-A locations, but you've been able to take that financial upside and parlay it into some type of other opportunity or investment, right?
Yeah, for sure. So several years ago, I formally founded my company, Birth of a Dream Ventures, which is my kind of investment arm that gives me an opportunity to invest in startups, aspiring entrepreneurs, and just other business ventures that are community and business minded And so over the course of several years, I've been able to build and will continue to build a very robust real estate portfolio. More recently, in the last several years, I've had an opportunity to invest in the private equity space, do some angel investing. And so I'm appreciative of, again, the cash flow that is derived from my Chick-fil-A opportunity, which is the main thing and will always be the main thing. You just can't, I don't know where else you'll get that kind of opportunity.
And something, even just the fact that you're doing these things, because a lot of people assume that you have to be inside the store for the full 6 days a week, open to close forever. That's kind of the vibe. Like, but you operate too, so that's already impossible.
Yeah, I mean, and that's nor is that written in the our franchise agreement. What you're contractually signing up for is that you are committing to maximize to the best of your ability this opportunity that is given to you. Being a really good steward of what's entrusted to you. So when you think about that, that's what you're signing up for. How are you stewarding this opportunity and maximizing what is given to you?
Yep.
Yeah.
And as we've been talking about these other brands, when we go back to the operators, and I assume, you probably have good insight into the other operators within Chick-fil-A.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen someone come from a McDonald's or a Taco Bell or one of these big QSR brands and switch to the Chick-fil-A model?
Absolutely. I remember this one time I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine who actually came from a different competitor, and we won't say their name, but a very popular QSR, right?
Okay.
And I was just interested, like, why make the switch? Why make the change? And he kind of broke it down to me in this sense of what I was sharing earlier is the amount of debt, the equity, and the stress that you have to put into building that opportunity from the ground up to start to realize the delayed reward. It was just so much easier to transition to a business model such as Chick-fil-A, where you kind of get a direct influence on controlling the cash flow that you're going to earn.
Yeah.
Right? Better predictability, if you will. And I agree with that, right? At least that's my own personal feeling that I get from it. I wake up and because I'm very involved in the Brooklyn community. And so I talk to other restaurant owners and we share problems and just experiences across our various restaurant concepts. And when I oftentimes sit back and I listen to the differences, I'm grateful that, man, I don't know if that particular model would have been for me, having to wake up constantly trying to figure out, well, am I going to be able to meet this demand or to pay X, Y, and Z or carry this load of debt consistently? With my opportunity with Chick-fil-A, if I wake up tomorrow, it's as simple as, hey, here's my 30-day notice, if you will, and I get to walk away. I don't have to worry about trying to resell the asset. I don't have to try to quantify, hey, how much have I put in over the years? Like I've been in this model now, 12 years plus? And so to sit down to think about, do I really want to do that? Is that model for me? I don't wake up with that level of stress.
Yeah, I think something that I just try to impress upon people from all the franchise owners I interview is the goal is always build up a portfolio, sell it to private equity or some buyer. Like that's the dream everyone has in their head.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've been talking about, right, it's so hard to do that. And that's not to like dissuade people from trying to do it. I think it's a worthy goal, but you just have to know yourself. If you're the type of operator who can handle the stress we're talking about, the financial hardships, and really just the financial strain it's going to put between all the loans that you're likely going to have to put into it, unless you do go a different route and raise capital. But overall, it is not something that's even close to guaranteed. Is getting that liquidity event at the end of it.
And I want to take a moment to go back to address, hey, do you have to be in your restaurant? Because that is also one of the biggest misconceptions about what the opportunity is. With anything that you're trying to build, and I say this unapologetically and unequivocally, you need to make sure that you have a presence. It's a restaurant. Anytime someone approaches me and they want to talk about the Chick-fil-A opportunity, I always ask them first, do you want to own a restaurant? Because there is a difference, right? Just because I have the power of this big name brand, such as Chick-fil-A, it's still, in an essence, no different if I was to go across the street and open up Brandon's Rib Shack. I have to go in, I'm the quality taster, right? I am the chef, I am the general manager, all of those different things.
Yeah.
And so for you're building something and anything worth meaningful of value to build, you need to have a presence in order to continue its longevity, the sustainability, especially at the high level of excellence, which is demanded, not only just by Chick-fil-A, the brand, but from our guests, from the guest perspective, right? People, when you oftentimes hear Chick-fil-A, it's associated with the level of premium and excellence. And so, yeah, you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can in order to make sure that there's longevity and sustainability in that.
Yeah, it's definitely the brand, I would say, is synonymous with an expectation of hospitality that you don't get anywhere else in the fast food world, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and I can personally speak to that because prior to my time at Chick-fil-A, I worked at several other of our competitors.
Yeah.
And it was just totally different, the experience that I was able to have when I started at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into how your journey started at those competitors. But before we do, I want to touch on, because you operate two, how common is that within Chick-fil-A? Because again, most people just think you have to own one store, and that's where they cap you.
Well, first, understand when you're signing an operator agreement, you're understanding that it's one unit and one opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? Speaking to the rarity, I think is just a little north of 20% of multi-unit operators, and operators that have more than 2 restaurants, which is 3, is less than 2%.
Damn.
Yeah.
Is that the max? Is there another one's 4?
Yeah. So there is an internal max that you can have, but let's break down the economics of that, right? When you think about the average unit volume of running one Chick-fil-A restaurant and you start to compare that unit volume to other industry standards, you understand why there's a limit. Yeah. You understand why there's a limit. I mean, case in point, like, let's talk the average unit volume of a McDonald's, right?
Just north of 4 million.
Yeah. So just north of 4 million. Well, the average Chick-fil-A
outside of a mall,
north of 9.
Yep.
So double that. Yeah. So think about, if I'm saying I'm owning one Chick-fil-A restaurant, that's equivalent to 2 to 3 McDonald's already. So when you think
of responsibility,
it's a huge responsibility. Again, going back to the ownership aspect, right? Well, yeah, I don't build equity, but you best to believe all of this day-to-day decision making, I have to own that. The systems, the processes that's dealing with anything people, I have to develop, steward, and grow that. But then there's no playbook that Chick-fil-A hands you to say, oh, this is how you should develop your people. This is how you should structure your leadership team.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, you've developed an interesting kind of leadership component within your stores, which we'll talk about. But as far as getting selected to even be an operator, what is that like? How does it work?
There's this popular saying that it's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get selected as a Chick-fil-A franchisee. And that's about right, man. We have hundreds of thousands of applicants that either apply and or express interest. And I think typically we only select they open only about 80 to 100 new stores a year. So imagine how competitive and selective that process is. And I'm proud to be among that elite number that were selected. But it is a very thorough and highly selective process. To the tune of, I've heard candidates be in the interview process for 2 to 3 years. Myself personally, I think I was in the selection process for over a year, right? And when I sit down and I think about that, it's like, I am proud to be a part of a brand that is so highly selective about who they choose to do business with. Because we talk about, Truett had this favorite biblical verse, Proverbs 22:1. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, right? And that shows up in almost every single thing that we do. And it starts with the selection process, who they choose to do business with. And they want to know, because it's not, when you think about Truett and the design of the operator agreement, think about the barrier. He wanted to remove the financial barrier to give access for those who truly had the heart, the intellect, and the integrity to be able to do business with him.
Yeah.
And that's not something that anyone should take lightly when it's your name on the line, right? And so I'm appreciative of how thorough and highly selective the process is.
Yeah. I coincidentally was speaking to someone who's on the Red Wagon Ventures team at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about the core Chick-fil-A business at first. And I was surprised to hear that he was just talking about the types of people that become Chick-fil-A operators. And some of them have very impressive backgrounds that they're leaving Fortune 500 executive positions, leadership in the military. I mean, can you speak to just some of the different types of people and the caliber of their experience before Chick-fil-A?
Yeah. So prior to me becoming a Chick-fil-A franchisee, I served on their leadership development team, which was essentially an opportunity for me to go out in the field, partner with franchise owners to help them launch their businesses across the chain, right? More or less serve as a supportive consultant for them. And so during that time, for the almost 3 years that I was on the road, I came across a number of highly intelligent, operators. I've had an opportunity to serve a 2-star general, an executive VP for a Fortune 100 company. These men and women that wear the title Chick-fil-A owner operators are some of the brightest and best talent that there is out there. And for almost 3 years, I got an opportunity to work alongside them in helping them to start their business. And what I would also say, I've seen this opportunity be the most challenging for them.
Yeah.
And from my own experience, what I would tell people, there is nothing like feeling the weight and pressure of something that's truly your own until you're actually in it. I don't care how much talent that you think you may bring to the table, but talk about being served a piece of humble pie, because it's just different layers, right? I spoke earlier about there is no playbook that is written for you to follow when it comes to how you build your team, how you manage your team, let alone, we're not just talking about your already highly motivated, highly educated type team. We're talking about you may have a workforce of high schoolers, and this is their first opportunity, right? And how do you get that teenager to want to engage to achieve the high level of results that you need them to do and that the brand demands, right? That's a different ballgame when you're thinking about just truly getting in to own and operate a restaurant. The stakes are just different. Your stakeholders and who you're serving, that clientele is different. And so I've seen some of the best be challenged when they step into this opportunity.
Yeah. Well, is there anything, people who are listening to this or watching this, is there any specific experience if someone's like, I would love to take a stab at being a Chick-fil-A operator one day? Is there something that they should be doing to almost like build their resume, right? Like if you're applying to college, you got to build a resume, right? If you want to get into Harvard, but if you're trying to get into Chick-fil-A, like the SAT score is probably not going to help you.
Yeah. Well, here's what I would say. 3 questions that I tell candidates to understand before they want to venture down that path.
Yeah.
1, why do you want to own a restaurant, right? Why do you want to own a business? And then try to answer the question of why Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
But in that order, why do you want to own a restaurant? Why do you want to own a business? And then why Chick-fil-A? Oftentimes, candidates try to answer the question of, oh, here's why I want to own a Chick-fil-A, right? Another thing, a misconception is, I have this piece of land. I have this lot of land that I want to try to pitch to Chick-fil-A. That's not how the process works.
Yeah.
The best way for you to truly understand is this, right? Tune into your podcast, listen to operators such as myself, reach out to your local owner operators, really try to get out there and understand what the business opportunity is, and then decide if this model is for you or if it's not, because it won't be for everyone. And I would definitely say, going back to that first question, why do you want to be a restaurant owner? Right? Because I've worked alongside men and women who had 0 restaurant experience. And so their why was different. But you also have to understand you're owning a restaurant.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to get in there in the kitchen, which is the heart and engine of the entire operation. If you are afraid to roll up your sleeves, get down and dirty, this opportunity may not be for you.
While Chick-fil-A might not be the right opportunity for you, if you're interested in other franchises, head to our website for a free consultation.
It's it's a fascinating just process, but I like that you start with, hey, regardless of what you think and what you want to do, you got to want to be in the restaurant business.
Yeah. And I ask that question. There's about 5 questions that I ask because people approach me about the opportunity all the time. And so now my assistant and I have just kind of developed this one pager of hey, answer these questions. And that kind of helps me weed out who I want to be able to spend my time with as it relates to trying to coach and or mentor them through the process or what the process can look like.
Yeah.
Right. And even then there's no guarantee. I don't hold those cards in my hand. But I have no problems or issues with sharing with you the things that I do, what makes me successful today as a franchisee, and share those.
Before we transition to maybe the start of your journey to eventually becoming a franchisee, the last thing on the process that I'd love to learn more about is, Chick-fil-A is obviously known for their hospitality. And I kind of think of it in a few layers where it starts with corporate at the top. And it really started with Truett Cathy with this approach to hospitality that Chick-fil-A has. And then they're so selective on the operators because each location that is run by each operator is effectively the distribution point for that hospitality across the country. But if you mess up on choosing an operator, that hospitality that Chick-fil-A strives for could break down, right? Mm-hmm. So how are they throughout the process of becoming an operator, applying and going through that whole phase? How are they stress testing you to know that you're going to be able to deliver that on a consistent basis?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because I think people's first instinct is they want to try to pull up some numerical metric to try to track and measure of are we doing this? Or some type of customer engagement survey. Sure, we have all of those tools and resources. But what I try to tell people, this is about culture, right? This is not something that, hey, we just started. And culture is a systems of norms and behaviors that you build within your restaurant. And from my own personal experience, my first day engaging with the Chick-fil-A selection team was white glove service the whole way through. From the person who was reaching out to coordinate my time, the follow-up, hey, we just want to keep you involved. Here's where you're at in the process, right? That is the level of hospitality. It is the behaviors that are, one, being modeled from the top down, that sets us apart. And then you support those things through the numerical data points that you can kind of track and that some can be subjective, some may be objective, right? But from a Chick-fil-A hospitality perspective, I see that both professionally and personally. Engaging with the Cathy family, there's just always this high level of, we want to serve you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And again, me speaking from my own personal experience and having come from other QSR brands, I've just never experienced anything like it. And that's hard to replicate, genuineness. And I even find myself, employing some of those same practices, even when I select for my own team. It's the certain little nuances that you look for. Because when I think about my own team members, I can teach you how to ring numbers into the POS system, etc. But if there's a piece of paper that drops on the floor and you walk right past it, there's something different. And you'll be able to tell the person that picks it up versus the person who keeps walking past. You can't teach those things inside of the restaurant. You can look for those. And to me, that's hospitality. That's the person that wants to go the extra mile. And that's centered around culture and behavior. And what do you do to create that versus, hey, here's a target that we're trying to achieve, and here's what we need to do to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're kind of touching on the technical skills, like whether it's ringing through a customer on the point of sale system, or whatever the case may be. That's all trainable and hard skills, but the soft skills are arguably a lot more important.
For sure.
But how are you filtering for you personally at the store?
Yeah, so we have a very intricate kind of leadership or training system that I've kind of created. We have a 3-step interview process, typically where we try to assess for chemistry, competency, and character, right? So typically we start with the chemistry aspect, where we just try to understand who the individual is. And so we look at how involved are they in the community, and not to say, hey, that's a deal breaker if you aren't, right? But for those high schoolers or those teenagers that we may be hiring, we look at, hey, tell us how you're showing up in community service opportunities. Again, because those are the soft skills that we can't teach necessarily inside of the restaurant. But our ideology is like, if you're already doing those things, 9 times out of 10, when you come over to the restaurant side and you become a team member, it's less likely that you'll be apprehensive about adopting what we feel is our level of hospitality.
Yeah.
Right. And so the character part is just about who you are. We're trying to assess for integrity. We're trying to assess for accountability. Are you someone who knows how to hold yourself accountable? Are you risk adverse? Can you accept criticism? Are you afraid of failure? And then obviously there's the competency piece. Can you just do the job? And so we have various types of assessments that we deploy to kind of help us ascertain that. But we take all of that in a holistic approach with the person and having an in-person experience. And even how we design that is with the thought of, are we showing good care for the person and their process overall?
All right, let's contrast that with, we'll rewind the clock here.
Okay.
You're back in college, your first job in fast food. Why did you have that job while in college? And what was the onboarding process like there? Relative to what you just described, what you put your potential employees
Yeah.
through.
So, well, Chick-Fil-A wasn't my first fast food. Yeah. So I had worked at several different concepts. McDonald's, Taco Bell, Crystal's, worked at several of those competitors.
This is while you're at Alabama State.
Yeah. This is while I was attending Alabama State, historically black college and university in Montgomery, Alabama. And so how I actually got to Chick-fil-A, you asked the question of why I was working. To be honest, I was a broke college student. I had this old 1993 Ford Taurus that I had to pay, insurance on.
Ford Taurus too.
Yeah, man. I can go on and on and on about that. But nevertheless, I had certain expenses and bills that I needed to make sure that I maintained, and didn't have a whole lot of necessary support in doing that. So I had to get it on my own, and that's okay. And so not only was I working, I was a student full time, and I was student leader in various organizations, most notably our marching band. I was a drum major for the Mighty Marching Hornets bands for 2 years, which at a HBCU, that's huge.
Yeah.
Right? When you're leading, I think at the time when I was in the band, we had almost 350 students that you're responsible for in terms of leading and orchestrating. And that's very intensive, right? And so how I got introduced to the Chick-fil-A brand, now mind you, I grew up in Atlanta, which is the birthplace of Chick-fil-A, but I knew nothing about the brand. In fact, where I grew up, on the side of town where I grew up, which is east of Atlanta, East Atlanta, we just got a Chick-fil-A in our neighborhood like several years ago. And so it was just, to be honest, it was always too expensive for my family. And so I never knew anything about Chick-fil-A. So I had a friend of mine in college that was like, yo, Brandon, Chick-fil-A is looking for a marketing director role. I think you would be good for it. You should go and apply. And I'm like, dude, no, I'm not trying to build a career out of fast food, in spite of what y'all may see, in spite of what you may see, but this is not a long-term career goal for me.
Temporary.
I had aspirations of finishing business school, go to law school, then go work on Wall Street.
Okay.
And so my friend just kept applying to peer pressure until one day I finally said, all right, I'm going to apply. And what stumped me about that opportunity, I walk in, apply, get the interview, and even after a series of 5 interviews, that Chick-fil-A operator, who's a really good friend of mine to this day, they still had not believed my resume. And so they thought, man, you're too young to be this accomplished off my resume. And so what I was appreciative about it, the level of scrutiny and selectiveness that they had, even at that level, at the store level, that blew my mind. And I'm a type of person, like, I like to take on challenges. And so I approached it from the perspective of, okay, I'm gonna show you better than I can tell you, right? Yeah. And so that's what I did. I didn't trust the process at first, because what that individual operator also did, he said, is, hey, I see that you have leadership skills, managerial skills, but in my organization, we believe that leadership is a title that is earned. So we'll bring you on board, but you'll have to earn a leadership position. And I said, okay, challenge accepted. So for the period of about maybe 3 or 4 months, I was the overnight supervisor at Taco Bell. I would go in at 10 o'clock at night, get off at 6, run across the street, change clothes, and open up at the Chick-Fil-A across the street. Did that for about 3 months because, one, I was getting paid less at Chick-fil-A, right? I was coming from a supervisory position. And so to have to start over, I was like, I just don't know. But within that short time span of 3 months, the cultural difference that I experienced at Chick-fil-A was just night and day difference.
From the Taco Bell.
Night and day difference. Yeah. Night and day difference. And so I was like, all right.
Quite literally, because you're working overnight at Taco Bell.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, well, I mean, it's no secret. I left that job and stayed with Chick-fil-A. And man, am I glad that I did. And so the story just started to continue to blossom and evolve from there. I started to get various leadership and ownership opportunities within that franchisee's business.
This is all while you're still in undergrad?
All still while I'm in undergrad, right? So I give you a case in point. I would be leaving production management class, right? Learning about just-in-time inventory and production management. I walk in and my boss would say, Brandon, guess what? Today I want you to take over inventory. And I'm like, what? No way. I was just learning about that in the classroom. Yeah. And I think that's what's so unique about the experience. Here I am. I had the opportunity to learn textbook theory and apply it to real world application. And that was so beneficial for my growth and development in undergrad. So much so that by the time I became a senior, I had been approached. The university at the time was going to pay for my master's to stay. Right? I had told you there was still an opportunity to go to law school, but I had just been approached by who now what I call my mentor today. He had just approached me with an opportunity to move to Chicago, which was at the time was a brand new opportunity for Chick-fil-A, or a brand new market for Chick-fil-A. And so here I am, I have these 3 options on the table, and I'm like, oh man, what do I do? Right? Logically, most people would say, are you crazy? You need to stay here, get your master's. It's free. Who turns down a free master's? Yeah. This guy, right? And so I remember talking to my advisors, and I had this one, what I call these God moments. I had a freshman professor, Dr. Shirley Jordan. I'll never forget. I'm walking across the yard one day, and she's like, Brandon, you've been on my mind a lot lately. And she reaches in her purse. I kid you not. I can't make this up. She reaches in her purse and hands me this book by Dr. Ben Carson called Take the Risk. And I was like, wow. So I'm reading this book. And the essence of the book, he walks you through this best case, worst case scenario. And essentially what he's saying is, oftentimes when we're assessing risk, we think about what's the worst that can happen versus what's the best that can happen. And so after reading that book, I was like, man, this is a sign from God, because my heart was saying, go pursue Chick-fil-A, right? You're young enough and you have good relationship equity. If all else fails in Chicago, you can come back. Alabama State will still honor the master's program for you. Or you still have the option to go to law school. Yeah. And so that's what I did. 2 weeks after I walked across the stage, I packed everything I owned and drove 14 hours straight from Alabama to Chicago to start a brand new life, making $12 an hour. And man, am I glad that I made that decision, because look at how it's paid dividends today. And every lawyer that I have on my team or that I talk to always say, dude, you definitely made the better decision.
Yeah. The lawyers, man. It's a tough life.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so 2 weeks after you graduate, you're in Chicago, and you're just starting at the bottom in a new Chicago store?
So I took on a general manager, director of operations role under a different franchisee. Okay. At the time, this was the second location in the Chicago market, right? And so,
And what year is this, just to set the stage?
so this is 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. 2010. In fact, I moved to Chicago December of 2010, just before the infamous snowstorm that they had in January of 2011.
Yes.
And so here we are, brand new market. I can recall times I'm at the train stations trying to give away free food. People are like, get away from me. What is this? People don't know how to pronounce the name. What is this Chick-fil-A?
Yeah.
And so talk about having a real world experience. And by the way, I also, because I'm just highly ambitious, I enrolled in an MBA program while still working.
Just
because.
Yeah.
And my fear at the time was I define success as being ready for the opportunities when they're presented versus getting ready. And I felt if I would have stopped pursuing my educational background or endeavors that I wouldn't go back. So I had to have that consistency. So I enrolled in an MBA program, ended up having to pay for it out of pocket, but nevertheless, I still made it work. And so I'm there helping this franchisee get his, run his business, his day-to-day operations. At the time, he was coming from a mall location and I was coming from a freestanding location. And so we're bouncing ideas and learning experiences off of each other as we're just trying to build our internal team and also be a good steward of the brand and grow the Chick-fil-A name in the Chicago market.
Looking back, would you say you were maybe just hedging? Like you weren't sure if this Chick-fil-A thing would work out, so you're hedging your bet on that by like, hey, let me try to get an education while doing it? Or was it really just what you said about being prepared for it?
No, I was very strategic in why I did what I wanted to do. Because at this time, in order for me to go all in with Chick-fil-A, I was already sold. Right. So no one had at that point wasn't talking to me about the franchise model. Again, me in my ambitious thinking, I was like, well, maybe I can climb the corporate ladder. My undergrad is in accounting. I'm pursuing my MBA with a concentration in finance. So I began to see the opportunities beyond the four walls of the restaurant. And that's what I try to tell people, especially young college students today, right? Everyone wants to frown upon the fast food, grimy type jobs, but they fail to realize beyond the four walls of that restaurant, there's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise and support systems that help franchisees in the field.
Yeah.
Right. And so you got financial consultants, business consultants, marketing avenues, all of those different types of things, IT, right? And so once I started to learn those things, it then became all right, I want to be strategic about this because I want to be able to position myself if this doesn't work. Right? Where else could I go?
Okay, I see. No, that makes a ton of sense. And then diving just for a second into that operator in Chicago, you said he came from a mall location.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, I think it's fascinating how Chick-fil-A grew originally by going into malls and expanding that way. But obviously it's a much different operational setup than a freestanding location where you have a drive-through or potentially double lane drive-throughs today.
Yeah, triple lane drive-throughs in some cases.
Yeah. So, I mean, what did you learn anything from that operator, just about what he had to change to be able to now do well in this freestanding?
Yeah, for sure. And I think we were learning together. And one of the things that I was most appreciative about this operator is that when it came to a certain point, he allowed himself to step back and allow me to fully take control over the operations to help grow and steward his business. And that was the opportunity that I needed to learn on someone else's dime. And you can't underestimate the power in learning on someone else's dime, right? And so I think his mindset was, one, let's talk about team dynamics. Typically in a mall, maybe you have 20, 25. Your staff count may triple in a freestanding restaurant, right? The average, I think last stats that I was reading, the average freestanding operator has an average team member count of about 80 team members.
Crap.
Yeah.
80
employees for one location. So imagine coming from a mall perspective or a mall opportunity where you may have 20, 25, 30, and you're doubling and tripling that in some instances, right? I remember even for my first location, At our peak, at one time, I had almost 225 employees for one location. at my peak, right? And granted, it can vary depending on the makeup and dynamic of part-time versus full-time employees, but still, nevertheless, that's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
And so I think being able to watch my operator at that time shift his mindset and how he approached team development and leadership development, and just building teams holistically, there's no amount of MBA classroom experience that you can put and compare that with.
If you're trying to get that experience, you got to be in it. There's no other way.
You got it. Yeah, for sure.
How does this roll with you working directly with this operator in Chicago? How does it evolve? Because eventually you get into the leadership.
Yeah. So from there, I spent almost 2 years in the Chicago market. At the same time, I was working to support other franchisees, which is an internal program that Chick-Fil-A has where current restaurant employees get an opportunity to go and train and help launch a new restaurant. And
so you're traveling?
Yeah, I'm traveling as well. And so I start to meet other I start to meet other mentors. And so I think one of the biggest aspects that I was able to take away from the Chick-fil-A opportunity was when I moved to Chicago, that was the first time someone had actually sat me down and started to speak to me about the franchise model.
Okay.
And so I was like, man, interesting. And so case in point is how I got introduced to the Chick-fil-A leadership development program. And so I completed my MBA, and literally a couple of weeks later, well, actually, let me take that back. Another guy moment, right?
Yeah.
I had a wall at one point working in Chicago. Like, I became burnt out. I was like, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think now I'm making $14 an hour at the time.
But you're working in the Chick-fil-A while you're getting your degree.
Yeah.
You're going to class.
Literally,
there work and tests.
There would be times my team would come in and find me sleep in the restaurant from the night before. But that's true ownership, because I wanted to make sure that it was right. No one was telling me to do that, right? But I cared about this operator's business as if it were my own. And I think that's key, right? I remember closing down the restaurant, going to the back office, writing out this paper, falling asleep at the computer desk, waking up the next morning, running across the street to the gym to take a shower, to come back and do it all over again the next day, right? And so for me, that was the drive and determination that I had, because I wanted whatever the opportunity could be, right? And when I got introduced to the Chick-fil-A leadership program, I was like, okay. And so once I completed my MBA, several weeks later, I remember getting a call because I originally applied for an accounting position. Once I hit that wall in the road, and I was like, I just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I called a mentor of mine and said, are there any corporate positions at Chick-fil-A that I can do?
Yeah.
And at that point, I was going to pivot and rely on my financial background. And so Chick-fil-A flies me down. I interview for an accounting position. And this is one of the beauties that I love about the brand. I get done with that accounting interview, and Chick-fil-A says, no, we don't see you crunching. On the spot.
Damn.
I don't see you crunching numbers. I actually think you would be bored as an accountant. This is the interviewer telling me.
So it wasn't like, hey, you're not qualified for this. It was, we literally think you will be unhappy if we give you this position.
Yeah. But that is the level of care. For them to say no and to redirect me to a role that has undoubtedly changed the trajectory of my life. That is the type of brand that I'm a part of, right? And that's actually how I got introduced to the leadership development program.
It takes a special person to kind of look at you as an individual and actually think about what are your strengths, where would you be happiest? Because, some people could just say, yeah, you're qualified, and, we'll see what happens. Good luck.
Yeah, or they simply could have just left it at no.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? And so I'm grateful for that. So that kind of concluded my time in the Chicago market, in which I then embarked upon this almost 3-year journey where I just traveled literally 50 weeks out of the year, traveling across the country to support franchise owners.
Is your mindset when you're in that 3-year program, I'm in it now to win it and become a Chick-fil-A operator? Or
at the time, no, it wasn't. I still had that ambitious thought of like, maybe I can be a Cathy one day.
Oh, so you want to
president, climb
the corporate ladder.
Climb that corporate ladder,
Yeah.
right? And so it wasn't until I got a call from my boss at the time that said, Brandon, do you know Chick-fil-A is going to go to New York one day? Because mind you, we had zero presence in the New York market with the exception of a licensee at NYU. And so there were no brick and mortar opportunities. As you know, our first restaurant opened here in 2015 in Midtown Manhattan. And so I was just traveling and my boss calls me because everyone knew my story. It was like, oh, I wanted to be this big Wall Street corporate lawyer.
Yeah, I was going to say the Wall Street.
Yeah. And that was prior to me falling in love with the brand Chick-fil-A. But nevertheless, it was still a part of my story. So she calls me. She's like, yeah, man, Chick-fil-A is going to go to New York. And I said, well, this is it. She's saying I may get to go to New York. I just may be selling lots of chicken and not practicing law. And sure enough, that's how the story has unfolded. Yeah. So like I said, I spent almost 3 years in the program supporting operators. And when I started my franchise opportunity or the selection process, again, we still weren't in New York. And that's actually how I got to Baltimore. Right. And so Chick-fil-A was very strategic in wanting to build like their candidate profile. Right. They kind of knew the type of owners that they were looking for to want to go into New York market. It takes a different kind of owner operator to kind of tough it out in the New York market. And so they wanted to build this pipeline of talent of candidates that they thought would be very successful in that market. And here I am in my young 20s. I had the guts. I had the will and determination and a drive. But what they yet were to see was the business results. Yeah. I had never owned a business before. Yep. And that took me through a series. I think I interviewed probably 20 different times. Because at that time, I was standing on top of the table to say, let me be your first to open in New York City.
Well, so is this at the tail end of the 3-year program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, at that point, though, Chick-fil-A knows who you are. It's very different. I've spoken to people who apply from the outside.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Whereas you're known within corporate, you're known to certain operators through this program.
Yeah, and that certainly helped my candidacy, but the system and the process is the system and the process. At the end of the day, when it came up to who was competitive, I was in the pool with everyone else. So my candidacy was no different from the 2-star general that I served, the VP of the Fortune 100 company that's leaving and now they want a franchise opportunity. We are in the same bucket. If anything, and this is my personal experience, this is not something that I know for sure that happened behind the scenes. It's like, I would like to think that what my experience with Chick-fil-A did was just fast track my application, but it didn't change the selection process.
Yeah.
Right. I still had to go in and present myself as a competitive candidate for a franchise opportunity. And nothing else changed.
You're a few years out of college.
So. And I'm fresh out of college, a few years out of college. Yeah.
You have any imposter syndrome, like even attempting to do this at such a young age?
Yeah. I did, right? I think I would be telling a bold-faced lie if I didn't, right? Because most successful people have imposter syndrome.
Everyone does.
Yeah. And so, absolutely, because I'm in my 20s, and I remember meeting with the executives of Chick-fil-A. It's like, I'm sitting here
bullets, man.
doing my research. I was just that crazy guy. I remember I requested my boss, I said, hey, stop putting me on West Coast assignments. I'm not a West Coast guy. If y'all ever made me an operator on the West Coast, it's like, I would never be in my restaurant because I would be at the beach somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I thrive off the hustle and bustle. So
Okay.
I was very self-aware that I needed to be in an environment like that. But number one, I wanted to be in an environment where I grew up in. I'm a city guy. I grew up in East Atlanta. And so to be able to be a part of a community where individuals look like me, it was innovative, right? When you think about expansion and international footprint, when people come and they want to study international markets, where do they come oftentimes? New York, right? And so to be a part of that, right? To be a part of the test case studies for our international expansion team, I love being a part of that type of innovation. And so I was very clear about where I wanted to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this wasn't just about the market you specifically wanted to be in. It was also you were helping blaze a bit of a new path within Chick-fil-A to go from freestanding locations to a new model in urban environments.
Yeah. In urban environments. Exactly. Yeah. And that was part of my pitch, my competitive edge is, let me partner with you to help us figure out how to do business this way.
Yeah.
That was it. And I remember that's what it became. That's what it became. Hey, I want to partner with you to help us figure out how to do business this way.
Well, we're going to dive into that specifically. I think there's an interesting element to the prevalence of third-party delivery within your locations. But before we get to that, and before you even get to New York, you end up in Baltimore first.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, at the time, like I said, I was going through the process. We did not have a footprint in New York. Yeah. And so I wanted to be in a concept that was going to give me similar experience that I would imagine it would take to run a successful business in New York City.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people don't know this part of the story. I actually got selected for a downtown Philly location at the time. And I get to the table, last minute, the real estate deal went sour. Last minute. So now here I am, I'm an operator select, and I have no restaurant location. Home. Yeah, I have no home because the real estate deal went sour. And sometimes that can happen.
And you living in Chicago through all this?
No. So at this time, I had moved back to Atlanta. This was also during the same time that I had just lost my grandmother. And so I'm in Atlanta. And so when I get the call about Baltimore, because I went through several different locations, right? Just kind of assessing, hey, is this the right opportunity? Is this the right fit for me? Because mind you, I knew my why. I knew exactly where I wanted to be, and I knew the type of market that I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
And it was enticing it's new, right? Irregardless of whatever the risk, there was no guarantee that if I took these opportunities that it was going to be as successful as it is. And so I was intrigued and excited about those opportunities. And so that's actually how I got to Baltimore. It was the city's first downtown, inner city, urban location. And I said, all right, sign me up. I remember I took a weekend, drove up, and I just remember you saw the beauty of the Inner Harbor and all of the buildings. And I said, all right, this is it. This is where I'm coming. And so in April of 2015, I opened Inner Harbor, downtown Baltimore, and was there for almost 4 years. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 4 years. 2019 June is when I left. Yep.
So you're 26 years old?
27 now. Okay. Right? Because I got selected at 26, turned 27, and that's when we actually physically opened the location. Yeah.
Take me through whether it's pre-opening or grand opening, just what it's like at that age to be in charge of. How many employees you have?
I was on fire from a mindset perspective. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm an owner operator. I'm going to go out here, change the world. Yeah. I'm going to influence people and this and that. It's totally different, man. When the lights come on and the doors open and you hire that first employee, everything you thought that you knew, out the window. And mind you, I had thought I had it all. I thought I had it all down to the science. I had my leadership development manual. I got this, I got that. Change the whole perspective. Once you hire that first employee and you start to build the dynamic of the team. And earlier I talked about this. This is what humbles you, right? Because there is no playbook that is written to tell you how to manage the hourly workforce, right? How do you build and motivate and inspire other people to get said results? I think at the time, my highest amount of employees that I had when I was the owner of Baltimore was probably about 65, 70.
Okay.
Yeah. For one location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could see why there's no like, hey, everyone has to follow this uniform playbook for building culture or building the ops, because every operator is different. People have different styles. So it would be foolish to force the same thing down everyone's throat. But you had to have had some resources or something from Chick-fil-A, right, to guide you or give you an idea?
It's not from Chick-fil-A itself. It's from the ecosystem and the relationships that's built with you and other owners.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's where the power of relationships come in, right? The power of mentorship, having someone that's walked the path that you're trying to walk.
Yeah.
And hey, talk to me about how you train on this particular subject, or how do you approach this? And so again, that's just another beauty of the care and ecosystem that you get from the power of the brand Chick-fil-A, if you will. It's just the relationships and the caliber of men and women that come to the table and what you're able to glean from their experiences.
Yeah.
So it was just everything that I thought I knew, I had to rewrite as I was building.
I think one of the benefits of any franchise is that you do get into this community of other operators. And then when you think about Chick-fil-A, we've already spoken about the caliber of the operators in there. So you get to crowdsource the knowledge, take what you think works for you and apply that to your business. But just given your age, and I've interviewed enough people from this world, and even recently I spoke to someone who, like yourself, got into franchise ownership at a very early age in his young 20s, right after college. And he told me a story where he acquired a location of this brand that he was operating, and again, he's in his early 20s. He's really ambitious, really hungry to succeed, but he was brash, and the employee base of this location just were not cutting it. And rather than really think through it, he just fired them right away. And he said, he's like, very silly mistake. Like, I was immature, I was young, I didn't know the patience I should have had, and I didn't know how to educate and communicate better with the team. But to him, that was like his glaring mistake that he made early on. It's like, that was just one that stuck out of like, I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger. So is there anything in your mind that sticks out as like, I would never do that today, and that was just, I'm young and on the come up and I'm learning how to do things?
Yeah. I don't know if there were mistakes that I say that I would never do today. I think the mistakes I made were necessary for my learning and development. Has my mindset shifted from younger 20-something-year-old Brandon to now where I am and running 2 very successful locations? Absolutely. I've grown myself as a leader, right? I think about my earlier years during that time, and especially in Baltimore, I was in there every single day. In fact, I talk about this in my leadership guide that I developed called The 5 Seasons of Leadership. And with that, there's what I believe are several different seasons that leaders cycle through, right? And in that moment, I was in what I call the builder phase. I was wearing every single hat, right? In fact, I was there so much, my apartment was 2 blocks away. I could walk to the restaurant.
Yeah.
I remember this one particular time, my mom and my stepdad, I moved them up from Atlanta to help in the business, and my aunt as well. And there was this big snowstorm that came, and it was us 3 and maybe 3 or 4 other employees working in the restaurant, right? If that's not remnants of a small business owner, then I don't know what is, right? And so I think the lessons that I've learned from then that I carry with me now, especially as I have evolved as a leader and my team has evolved, is probably the biggest is I can't hold on to everything. If I want to continue to scale and grow, there are certain things that I just have to release, and you have to build a system around that, right? And so again, I talk about that in my leadership guide, the 5 seasons of leaderships, where those 5 seasons, you're a builder, you're a coach, the architect, right? The strategic season that you may have, and then you have this legacy season.
Yeah.
And I intentionally entitled it the seasons because just as with our natural weather seasons, they come, they go, and they repeat.
Yep.
They come, they go, they repeat. And that's what happens in this journey of leadership. And that's what I've learned, especially from my younger 20s to where I am today. And in those learnings, I've had to learn if I want to get to a level of scalability and to scale at a level of excellence, there's just certain things that you got to be able to release. And in order for you to release, you have to ask yourself, do you have a system and a process designed so that it can sustain at a level of excellency? And I tie that back into those moments that often determines whether someone gets selected as a franchisee in our ecosystem or they don't. Oftentimes, you have candidates that are highly, highly great individual performers. But when it comes time for them to say, here's how I replicate that, they can't do it. They can't explain the how. And that is the difference maker.
If you guys, you have 80 employees per location. So yeah, there's no way you're doing everything in that store. It's just physically impossible.
But it's almost kind of to a fault though, right? When you think about the typical corporate employee that's transitioning and they want to get into this space of entrepreneurship. What I've seen is they struggle sometimes because in a corporate environment, everything is so fragmented. You got an HR department here, you got an IT department there. And depending on where you fall in that, that structure, you may not have exposure to that. And now when you put on the hat of owner operator, guess who's responsible for developing all of those different departments? You are. And some people can't do it or they struggle. And either you're going to lean into that struggle and say, hey, how am I going to get better in this area? Can I outsource? Who do I need to tap into to help me strengthen this area where I'm weak? Or you're going to bow out. And that is why I say this business model isn't for everyone.
Yeah, because just like any other entrepreneurial endeavor, the buck stops with you.
And speaking of the buck stopping with you, if you're considering franchise ownership, get a free consultation from our team who already has experience owning franchises.
You have to figure it out.
Yeah, but you know how many times I get people that come to me and say, oh, doesn't just Chick-fil-A do it for you? No, where are you getting this from?
Yeah.
That is not how this works.
You may as well call yourself the owner because you're doing all the work for the most part, right? Aside from that.
You are doing it,
Yeah. I'd say the only thing I would caveat to that is when you talked about that kind of you get that VIP package, right? Where they're doing the accounting, they're doing some of these things around you that support you that you don't have to figure out on your own. But as far as inside the 4 walls, all the responsibilities on you. So as far as the building phase that you talked about that you were in when you were in, if we're talking about your 5 seasons of leadership, you were in the building phase, you called it, for your Baltimore location. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what your life was like outside of the Chick-fil-A? Did you have one? Because you said you're working in it basically every day. And this is more a question and I think a problem that I've run into myself. A lot of entrepreneurs have where the business and their ambition consumes them and then other areas of life kind of fall. Because you're working, if you're working 6 days a week in the business, you got Sunday to decompress, maybe invest a little bit more time in your personal life. Yeah. But what was that seasonal life like for you?
I definitely think there were some trade-offs. And I do look back and say, man, I wish I would spent more time developing, community relationships or relationships that would have been a lot more fruitful in my life. And so, I to your point with every entrepreneurial endeavor, it's seasons. You have seasons and not every bucket of your life is going to be able to operate at 100% capacity. And so for sure, I think as I continue to build right? And I moved into that next season of leadership, which was I was coaching, where I am training other people to do what it is that I do. A part of me being in that builder phase and working every single day, that was by choice. Part of it, right? Because I wanted to make sure that I became the master and the expert at what it is that I was doing. My mentor once said, hey, if you ever want to become an expert at something, teach it. Right. And you now go into the coaching phase where you're teaching others, whether that was my night shift manager. I really wanted them to understand, hey, here's how I would do it. And I wanted to make sure that I knew what it was that I was training and teaching them on. And every day wasn't a sun up, sundown type opportunity or a bad day, but I definitely had my season of it.
Yeah.
For those who think that you're going to be able to circumvent and get around that, it's impossible.
I agree. I think
it's impossible.
It's really hard to, I think, never go through that demanding season for the business itself. How long were you in Baltimore, and when do you get the call for, hey, New York, it's actually happening, and you're back on the roster here?
Yeah. So I was in Baltimore from April of 2015. By the way, 2 weeks after I opened, we were faced with the Freddie Gray riots that took place during that time, right? So talking about aha moment and literally things that I only had read about in the history books up until that time was happening in real time right in front of my restaurant. So I was in Baltimore for 4 years, from April of 2015 into June of 2019. And I remember right around in 2018, I always knew that Baltimore for me was a starting place. I always knew that it wasn't where I was going to always end up because I was very determined. Yeah. New York was where I set my vision, and that's where I wanted to be. I just didn't know where in New York. And I remember coming up to New York, and ironically enough, the operators, the owners that are here, we have an incredible team. And I had already worked with more than half of the team in various capacities from my time on corporate. So just the camaraderie that was already built, you know, when I was coming up to kind of canvas and understand the lay of the land in New York was one of those things, I guess, call it my another God moment for me, right? And so I came up, and I remember specifically, I thought all of the glitter and gold was happening in Manhattan. I was like, man, those Manhattan stores, they're on fire. They're doing this. And for whatever reason, this is why I call this a God moment. For whatever reason, every time I went to go and, you know, kind of throw my name in the hat, something would just go wrong at the last minute. Whether a deadline was missed or, oh man, we just selected for that opportunity for whatever reason. And I remember coming up, and I sat down with a good friend of mine, who's an owner in the city now. And he started talking to me about the Brooklyn. This was hot off the press. He was like, yo, real estate just called and was like, there's an opportunity in Brooklyn. So while I was here that day, having a conversation with my friend over coffee, I left, came across the bridge, and when I got off at the Barclays Center, and you kind of ride the escalator, everyone knows you get off that escalator and you get there and you're just like, wow, you're just hit with this presence of energy and vibrancy, right? And I looked at the location, I started walking around just to kind of get a feel. And I remember I went back, brought my family up to show them the location. And we walked, and I was like, God, if this is the opportunity where you want me to be, then make it happen. Yeah. Let it be known. And I'll never forget, I went through the selection process because it's a very, you know, it's highly selective. You have to kind of go through the same.
So for every location, you're
going through another selection process. Because if you're looking at it, who you are at one restaurant should not be who you're going to become when you're having 2 restaurants or 3 restaurants. Yeah. Right. Again, Chick-fil-A, they are just very, you know, selective like that. And I'm appreciative of the process because it makes me want to be better and stay consistent. right? That's how you build long enduring brands of high quality and excellence.
Yeah.
And I get the call after going through the process, because at that moment, it was what they were trying to assess with me and my team in Baltimore was, who has Brandon been over the last several years? How has he helped develop your business acumen? And has he demonstrated enough ability to replicate himself in others? And of course, obviously sustain high business results over a period of time. And I was on vacation. Up until that point, I had never really vacationed, right? And this was the first time I kind of took a vacation, and I got the phone call from one of my friends at corporate, and they're just blasting from New York. To just say like, yo, B, you're going to New York.
Let's go.
And I was just, the tears started to flow because even in the time that I started to come up in Canvas and Case Brooklyn, the stars just started to align. And in hindsight, when I look back to everything that was happening and what has transpired, Brooklyn was meant for me. And I was meant for Brooklyn. And it was such the better move for me. Yeah.
Was there ever any fear in your mind about getting stuck in Baltimore? Because there's no guarantee that you're
There is no guarantee. Yeah, there is no guarantee because, again, unlike the traditional, opportunities, I can't show up to Chick-fil-A and say, hey, I have this lot of land. Let's build a store here.
You're banking on them.
Yeah, you're following their trajectory, like growth path and where they want to go. And yeah, there were some times where I thought like, okay, well, what does it look like if I have to be in Baltimore a little bit longer? And Baltimore is such a great city, but I just knew I'm the type of person when I start something and I really put my mind to it, I want to get after it. And a part of that just comes from my upbringing and just the tenacity I've had to build to be able to sustain and endure. That's just how I'm wired.
So what year is it when you do go to New York, and are you as excited as you said you would be or thought you would be about these blazing this new path?
Yeah, absolutely.
Model?
Yeah, absolutely. So I moved to Brooklyn June of 2019. My restaurant opened September of 2019.
Oh boy.
And then what happens a few months later?
Boy, you're getting tested.
Yeah. COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, great, man. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm loving everything. Bed-Stuy.
Yeah, you're living a dream.
Yeah, I'm living a dream. and then COVID hits. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Oh. So not only have my generation, we've lived through war, right? Now we're looking at a pandemic, a global pandemic at that. All right. I start to think, how are we going to pivot? And
well, sorry, but before we get there, how would you say, like, where are you at with your store at that point? Do you feel in a rhythm, or are you guys still figuring things out, ramping up?
No, that's a great question. I was grateful to be able to relocate 7 of my leaders that I had developed in Baltimore.
Oh, okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
That's clutch.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how I would have survived, with them. They definitely enabled me to be able to grow a lot faster because we wasn't starting.
Yeah, you guys had
at level 1 again. Now, do we have natural attrition, turnover? Obviously, that happens with any business for sure. But we had found our rhythms, and I will tell you, having that 4 years in Baltimore definitely helped me anchor and pressure tests, stress tests, systems, and things that I had built out from my internal selection process of team members and leaders that I wanted to work in my organization, the different benefits package and things that I wanted to offer. Again, these are all things that when people say they think Chick-fil-A gives you, no, you're having to build and develop and craft these things on your own. And so I definitely accredit my time in Baltimore for the opportunity to be able to flush that out, try it. Hey, this doesn't work. This works. Let's add that to the playbook, etc. That way, when we got to Brooklyn, we were able to fire and execute right away.
As far as the actual build out process, are you a part of that at all as the operator? Or do you just get a call one day and it's like, all right, Brandon, like check out the store where it's fully done. And like the equipment's there, it's all shiny and brand new.
No. So once you get selected, there's an opportunity for you to kind of sit down with the architect and design team. But most often than not, the store is already designed. And you'll find that typical in any like franchise opportunities. They have their different package models, they call it,
Yes,
that they're presenting to you, right? Chick-fil-A, the difference is they have their internal packages and their models, and they kind of already know what the store and design is going to look like. There are some nuances that require operator input, if you will, but I'm not going in selecting interior design. Hey, here's how many seats I want. Now, there's opportunities for me to say, hey, I think we're going to do X, Y, and Z, over the long term. Can I get an additional equipment here? Or is it any possibility for us to add additional seating, because I know I'm a part of this neighborhood. I've been here.
Yeah.
My folks, they want to come in and dine and eat, right? So there's opportunity for you to do that. But that's another reason why I signed up with Chick-fil-A, because part of me, I don't want to think about that. They are the team of experts. They allow me to focus on what I am the best at, and that is operational excellence, efficiency, and leadership development. That is my powerhouse. That is my wheelhouse. That's my lane that I like to stay within. And if I want to defer, I would rather defer to my partner, Chick-fil-A, who already comes with this team of experts. They've already did the real estate analysis. Do I have visibility on that? Absolutely. Do I get an opportunity to ask the questions of why, who, what, when, where, why? Yes, absolutely. But I'm doing that with my trusted partner that I don't have to go and vet out on a traditional path.
I mean, it just speaks to kind of the power of the model, because Chick-fil-A, they're giving you the opportunity to provide input, but at the same time, most of your energy and time can be spent on the areas you said, right? Leadership development and your people versus, I mean, construction of the store. There's all these other aspects of the fast food game that can eat into what is ultimately most important, which is working with your team. So,
yep. Yeah. When people hear like these celebrities buying into the franchise opportunities and they're owning, and that's the idea of what people think ownership looks like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is far from the truth of what it is, because what you're not hearing and what you're not seeing is that celebrity owner is also paying an operator partner to go in and actually operate the business. And guess what that operator partner is doing? Eating away at the profitability line.
Yeah.
Because they ain't doing it for free, And so that is why you are operator, owner, operator in the Chick-fil-A model, because you're wearing both hats. Yeah. You're the owner and the operator, right? Because I'm already giving up a huge piece of the pie, right? To the tune of 50%.
Yep.
But that's okay. I appreciate that model because of everything that comes with that 50% that I'm sharing.
Let's get back to COVID. So I did some research because, FDDs are all public information. So 2020, a very weird year for the entire restaurant industry, naturally, given what happened. But Chick-fil-A would go on to share that the typical non-mall location did around $7 million that year. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the pre and post COVID and with whatever you're willing to share. Were you tracking to hit 7 million pre-COVID? And whether you were or weren't, what was just the change in the business after you pivoted during COVID?
Yeah. Now, Patrick, we're in Brooklyn. Brooklyn loves a good chicken sandwich. Okay. So question, were we tracking to do 7 million pre-COVID? Absolutely. We had far surpassed that number. And in a time when most restaurants had to scale back and or were shuttering, being closed down, I'm so grateful that our business was able to stay open because we were able to keep people employed. We became a focal center for essential workers and healthcare workers, right? For people to eat. These folks are still out on the front lines, serving their lives and serving each other. they still got to eat.
Yeah.
Right. And when you talk about from a numbers perspective, yeah, pre-COVID, well above, that $7 million threshold. 2021, we grew sales 37%.
Holy crap.
Second full year, we grew another 10.5%. Third full year, we grew another 17.5%. So I look back at that time where I also contemplated on closing because I didn't know. No one knew what to do. But again, this is where the power of the brand and partnership comes into play. Chick-fil-A had already been developing our Chick-fil-A One app, and that was already into play. So when in comes government regulations and the social distancing and 6 feet, stand away, there was a period of time where our dining room, in-store dining was shut down, right? And this goes back to location. We're right across, my first location is right across the street from the Barclays Center, right? So a lot of people think that my transactions count would be tethered to live events. Barclays Center was closed for a whole year with no events. And I just shared with you the numbers in which we grew. But that's also because we're in the largest residential borough in the city.
Yeah.
And we're the only Chick-fil-A at the time. And so coupled with, enormous growth because of the forethought thinking of my business partner launching a Chick-fil-A app and couple that with third-party delivery, that was the secret of my success. And kudos to my team because every single day I felt like we were changing our operational model, how we had to pivot and change. And depending on who you are, that would either make or break you. And because there's so much change, compliance perspective, you got to take in consideration team member well-being, and how do you still give the growing demand, the customers, what they want and do it at a level of excellence. And so kudos to my team for them having to pivot every single day to make sure that we were able to meet such a high demand with a high level of excellence.
Let's talk about third-party delivery and even just digital online ordering. So whether it's Chick-fil-A app, DoorDash, you name it. Do you have an idea off the top of your head of the transaction volume that ended up going through there during that COVID year?
Yeah, so
like as a percentage? Maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. So my digital, let's just say digital sales, right? So Chick-fil-A app, third party, 2020, 21, 22, and 23, north of 60%.
60.
Yeah. Yep, 60 of my business.
Would you say that the ability to push that volume through those channels is the biggest reason for your success through COVID?
Oh, for sure.
And did you already have like a pickup window ready in that model of the store? Or
not at all.
All the delivery drivers are walking into your main float lobby area.
Yeah. So we built our own kind of pivot, if you will, out of our exit door at the time. We kind of built a countertop table, and you saw this being deployed across even independent restaurant owners, right? You saw truest of innovation show up in the midst of COVID, right? And so we were no different at that point, just trying to figure out how do we best serve the third party guest, because ultimately we know at the other receiving end is the true guest that's waiting for their food. And how do we still serve our guests that we're actually still trying to come in and pick up their food? Yeah. In the restaurant business. Yeah.
And for whatever you're willing to share, how did things shake out that COVID year? Because I think in our conversation before we recorded, you were telling me that it was one of the higher performing stores across the country.
Yeah. So because of COVID and just what kind of like transpired, we were able to be catapulted to one of the highest grossing Chick-fil-A's because of that. One, I think, again, you couple that with just sheer population volume. No one's no longer commuting into the city. Where is everyone? At home in Brooklyn, right? And so people got to eat. Kids got to eat. School's not in session, or they're doing half days, you name it. So yeah, I, again, couple that with our flexibility provided by the Chick-fil-A app and third-party service providers. Yeah, we were able to be catapulted to being one of the highest grossing Chick-fil-A's.
When did the opportunity for the second store in Brooklyn come about?
So I always knew that we were going to expand in Brooklyn, right? We couldn't be the only kids in the sandbox forever.
Yeah.
But I think what COVID and our volume kind of shed light on a little bit sooner was that we needed to move faster.
Because there was that much demand.
Because it was that much demand.
Yeah.
And so I know when I opened the second location in Brooklyn, many people ask me, well, why so close? Well, one, if you have to be a true New Yorker to understand, even a matter of 5 to 10 minute walk, you can feel like you're in a different world.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so you could be serving a whole different clientele in just such a short amount of distance. But more specifically, we also knew that we needed the capacity relief from restaurant number one. Because one of the things that, while most people would praise my team and I on the success of the sales, I'm still a restaurateur, and the quality of the experience and the food matters. Right? And you never want to sacrifice those two just for the sake of just like sales. And so that was very important for, I'm sure, not only just for me, but for the Chick-fil-A brand itself. And so we knew that we needed to move rather quickly on just finding another location to provide capacity relief. And for me, I knew we were still missing the opportunity to serve more guests, whether it be through our Chick-fil-A mobile app in our own delivery system or third-party guests. And so what my second restaurant has allowed me to do is to even push further and open up access further east into Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how close walking wise, or
0.8 miles from each other.
0.8 miles? Okay.
Yeah. So 10-minute walk.
Did you have to go through a whole interview process and selection process for that?
Yep.
Holy crap.
There's no escaping it, man. There's no escaping it. And again, I appreciate the opportunity because, one, it gives me clarity and kind of affirmation. Hey, what I've been building, is it actually working? Right? And to really see my leaders shine. I've had leaders now that have been with me for 8, 9, 10 years throughout my tenure. But to truly see them articulate themselves with, men and women in suits and, coming from corporate backgrounds to say how they truly run my business, that's the most gratifying and fulfilling moment. Because at that stage, when you talk about another selection process, Chick-fil-A I know how to do it, right? Oh, Brandon, we've seen you do it, time and time again. It's not about you. It's about, can your leaders do it? When you're focused on restaurant number 2, who's still sustaining the level of excellence at restaurant number 1 or restaurant number 3? And that matters. And I can't reiterate enough the power of the level of intentionality that they put behind, is this the right opportunity for you to continue to expand and to grow?
If there's one thing I've learned from this conversation, it's that you are super ambitious. When you set your mind to something, you're going after it. So, and you said early on that you are always preparing to be ready for the next opportunity when it comes. With that first Brooklyn location, are you, and were you, I guess, hiring with this intentionality, knowing, hey, if there's a second Brooklyn location, I want to be the guy?
My team knew it from day one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're talking about store number 3.
Let's go.
Yeah. I think you have to be a visionary, right? Going back to my 5 seasons of leadership, right? You have to be able to, now there was a season of me living in that strategic season, right? I'm thinking about, where do I want my organization to be 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now? And then you move over into that legacy phase. That legacy phase is, now I'm developing future Chick-fil-A owner operators, or I'm developing future Chick-fil-A staff members, right? I'm in that phase or that season of my journey to where I'm starting to think about that. And it's highly important for me to share that with my team because I can't hold them accountable to a vision that they don't know.
The team that you're hiring, you are thinking 3 steps ahead when you're on store number 1 that I need to get this group ready so that I can get approved for store number 2. Because that's ultimately where you were going to either fail or succeed in getting approved. It wasn't you.
It's not about me.
Yeah.
They know I know how to do it. It's about, can Brandon replicate himself in his team so that when and if he gets store number 2 and he's focused on repeating those seasons again, do we have to worry about quality of store number 1 going down the drain?
That is very, very difficult to do. Let's start from the beginning of how you can do that. And I think it has to be called out that I grew up in New Jersey, love the Northeast, love the New York City area, whatever you want to call it. But culturally, it is not naturally similar to the Chick-fil-A level of hospitality. We don't say hi to each other.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I love it. I think people are great here, and I think we get a bad rap. But I would imagine that there is, for you, probably some struggle in hiring and trying to get people who grew up in this area to adopt that level of hospitality and that level of service because it's not what we're used to doing. So yeah, we'll talk about day 1, your open location. Like how are you, and we did touch on this a little bit earlier, but how do you even just sense who has maybe what it takes to become a leader within the store for you?
Yeah. So, man, I always say I'm able to get cultural buy-in is because 1, I know how to empathize with my team because I've also walked the shoes that some of them come from, right? When you think about the grit that it takes to thrive and to live in a city such as New York, right? Everybody says it, man, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And I get that because someone from the South where you get the luxury of jumping in your car on a rainy day like today, that's a luxury. Where New Yorker, no, you got to foot it. And who cares that it's raining, like deep, but that takes a different kind of like buy-in power to still get someone to show up in those type of conditions. And I always love to lead with, I see you, I hear you, and I've also been where you're trying to get to. Let me show you how, right? And I'm not going to allow you to make excuses for it. But if you allow yourself to be coachable, trainable, and you learn how to accept feedback, then something we can work. My philosophy is I approach everything from how can I help my team members win at life? So a lot of the things that I build that is specific and unique to the culture that I build. This is not a Chick-fil-A thing. This is the type of environment that Brandon J. Hurst wants to build for my organization. And ironically, that was birthed out of my mission, which is to simply love. And that is an acronym. And I'll tell you about another God moment, right? So love for us is an acronym. Lead with great tasting food, world-class hospitality. Offer opportunities of growth, stability, and exposure to new life experiences. Value ourselves and each other, and embrace our core values of honesty, integrity, and the commitment to excellence. And that's very personal for me. That's not anything fluff. When I think back to growing up, city life, Brandon, east side of Atlanta, also having to commute 2 hours each way, to get to the south side to go to school. That's grit, right? And I think about the O in that acronym. Offer opportunities of growth, stability, and exposure to new life experiences. The combination of those 3 factors is what has enabled me to rise above the circumstances of my environment. Opportunities to grow, stability, and exposure to new life experiences. My first time being on a plane was because of a Chick-fil-A opportunity. My first time traveling out of my state was because of a Chick-fil-A opportunity. And I've created so many moments like that for some of my other team members to be able to do. When I talked about earlier, that operator giving me an opportunity to learn on his dime, right? Powerful. Because now I give those leaders in my organization the same opportunity, even if it may cost me a couple of $1,000s.
Yeah.
Right? That's a mistake. And we learn and we grow. But these men and women in my organization are getting an opportunity of a lifetime. Not everyone is going to be able to go on and be the next Chick-fil-A operator, but it won't be because I did not give you an opportunity. Right? I've had people be launched from my organization and thrive somewhere else. I remember this young lady who, she was a leader in my organization. She was one of the leaders that she started with me in Baltimore, had a slight gap, but she took the leap of faith and moved to Brooklyn with me. She started off as our training coordinator, ultimately became one of our top training leader in my organization. And she was so passionate about social services and providing those type of services to our team. And what she wanted to do, I saw so much potential. I had to push her out of my nest for her to go and thrive. And now she's graduated with her MBA from Howard University. And she is a thriving, successful social worker here in the city of New York. That is impact. That is influence. That is the type of opportunities that through osmosis, right? Hey, let me show you how to lead a team. So that way, when you are launched from my organization and you walk somewhere else, you walk into someone else's organization, you already got the skill sets that you need to lead another team, right?
When you are hiring someone, though, or just with your team members, when we're looking at replicating Brandon so that a Chick-fil-A can run like the well-oiled machine it should be, and at that level of excellence that's expected, are you able to see the potential in a quality, a good worker, a good future leader during an interview process? Or is it something that you just got to see over time once they're actually in the store and you can see, hey, are they the type of person who does pick up the piece of paper?
I think it's a little bit of both. I want to answer that level. I want to answer that question from a leadership perspective, and then I want to answer it from a team member perspective, right? Oftentimes, at a team member perspective, I'm looking at, oftentimes, this job is an opportunity for them. So it's a coachable opportunity, right? So some characteristics they may not have walking through the door, right? Now, my leadership team, the standard and the filter in which I select for them is a lot higher than that of a team member, right? And now I am incorporating different behavioral assessment tools such as predictive index, right? Which is an assessment that I administer to some of my higher level leaders that it's a cognitive and a behavioral assessment, right? And emphasis a lot more on the behavioral assessments because now I'm trying to assess chemistry and match. I know that I'm such a high-driven, ambitious person. What this behavioral assessment does is it gives me an opportunity to see just naturally how you are wired as a person. Are you someone else that is ambitious, right? The cognitive side is not necessarily testing for IQ, but is retention of information. I'm moving at 1,000,000 miles per minute, right? Are you someone that's going to be able to keep up with how I live and how I move? Because I'll stop, slow down, show you how to do things once, maybe twice. But when you're trying to ask me a third, 4, or 5 times, doesn't mean that you're a bad candidate. It just may mean I'm not willing to slow down long enough to get you caught up to speed that way. And I think it's so powerful for leaders to be self-aware of themselves because that is the cultural dynamics that you're building within your organization, which is also why you may find how I run my organization is totally different from the next Chick-fil-A owner operator that's 2 or 3 miles up the street, right? Our leadership styles are totally different. Probably one of the most profound books that I've read that has helped me shift and shape that mindset when I'm thinking about selecting my leaders was I read this book called Who by G.F. Smart. And I think his subtitle is The Method of Selecting the A Player. And I'm paraphrasing here because this definition of an A player is, does the candidate that you're interviewing have a 90% chance at accomplishing what your top 10% of your current staff can do? That is the definition of an A player. And so I look at the top 10% of performers in my organization, and I try to sit down and I craft like, hey, what makes this person successful from a competency perspective, from a character perspective, from an integrity perspective? right? And I try to quantify that and put that in qualitative perspectives with the help of a tool like Predictive Index. And then I start to look for candidates and say, all right, who has the ability and a 90% chance at accomplishing what the top 10% of my performers do? And then I also, day one, my leaders also know the moment that you put on that leadership shirt, I am no longer looking at your individual performance. What I am evaluating you on is your ability to get results accomplished through a team.
Yeah. How dialed in is that, I guess, process for you? Meaning, when you have someone who you think is a 90% chance of becoming, in the top 10% of your workforce, do you ever get that wrong? And you're like, oh, wow, this person's not panning out the way I thought.
Yeah, I've gotten that wrong. And when I've gotten that wrong, I try to go back and assess where I've gotten it wrong. And ironically, believe it or not, is when I go back and I reference like their predictive index. And it kind of is a really good scientific measure to say like, man, see, you went against the grain here. I'll give you a case in point, right? I had a particular leader that I hired, and this was one where I got it wrong. Competency scores scored through the roof. And at the time, I thought, okay, great. Here's a person that can keep up with the pace. He's not going to have a whole lot of issues with retention. But when it came down to the cultural aspect, he just couldn't buy into it. He didn't know how to replicate himself. And so now my model of can you get results accomplished through other people, that went out the door.
Yeah.
And that was a mishire. And it doesn't mean that he was a poor leader or that I made a bad hire. It was a mishire. It was a mismatch.
It wasn't the right fit.
It wasn't the right
organization.
It wasn't a right fit for my organization. And you asked the question around how dialed in is that? In order for it to be dialed in, I also have to spend the intentional time with them. So there's this saying, I forget where I was reading this, but CEOs, COOs, how are you spending your time? Most of that time, 80% of your time should be spent with the top 20% of performers in your organization. And that is literally how I spend my time. I'm meeting with my top leaders weekly, and they get the benefit of the on-the-spot mentoring, coaching. And so when people are like, oh, is Brandon in the restaurant? You may not physically see me in the restaurant. I may be at my offsite office having a mentoring conversation with a leader who's maybe struggling, and I'm coaching them through how to coach someone else up through the organization. Or we may be assessing and evaluating our internal systems and processes. Does it still apply to our organization today? Right? So again, another misconception, you may not always be working in the business, but at some point, you better be working on the business.
When it comes to the behavioral and primarily the behavioral side of that test that you put them through, I mean, I've taken, I think it was called like the DISC assessment for a long time ago for a past job. Yeah. So it's funny. I used to hate those things because I'd get the piece of paper back. I'm like, screw this. This piece of paper doesn't like define me. Like, doesn't know me. As time's gone on, I have 100% seen. I'm like, okay, it's pretty good at predicting your natural wiring.
Yeah.
So are you at the point now where because it's not just about the other person, it's about you. And that's what you've been kind of mentioning is, do they mesh with my style?
Yeah.
So are you at the point where if they score a certain way on that behavioral test, that you'll just trust it? And even if other areas, or maybe even like in person, they seem like they could be a good fit, are you trusting that how kind of their wiring is to be like?
I never use the assessment as a standalone decision maker.
Okay.
It's never just an assessment, right? And I think that's kind of unfair practicing, and I never want to bias anyone from that perspective. However, it is a tool that I utilize to help me make a comprehensive decision. And that comprehension comes from the opportunity for me to, if I'm feeling a type of way after I've interviewed a candidate, I may go back and reference to confirm or to refute the thought process. that I have. And in some cases, there may be a candidate that just completely has bombed the assessment, like no shape, form, fashion that this is going to work out. And that doesn't necessarily disqualify them from having an opportunity to fully go through the process. But I am weighing and looking at all of those different factors. And what I also think is important to know, the predictive index tool that I utilize in my organization, it isn't just a tool that I use for hiring. We use it for ongoing coaching and assessments. So for example, I get a kick out of sitting my leaders down when they're at each other, and then I have them pull out their predictive index. And there's a tool. This is how much this thing is spot on. There's a tool that allows them to work through conflict resolution based on how they're wired. I can literally plug in your profile and my profile, and it would say, well, Brandon, you're a maverick. Patrick may be someone that's a scholar. So Patrick, he slows down, he processes it differently. So Brandon, because you're a maverick and you're just when you approach Patrick, you may have to approach it from this perspective. You may have to slow down and, deliver the message to him in this format so that he can receive it well. Come on, man. That type of tool and communication is a game changer when you're trying to manage not only multiple personalities, but I'm leading an organization of multi-generational and multicultural individuals, right? I'm employing people from various different parts of the world.
Yeah.
Right? So imagine that you're walking into an organization and you're being equipped with those tools and resources to help you. I could easily just say, oh, you don't know how to deal with this person, you're out of my organization. No, let's lean into that to see why there's a difference, right? And how do you shift that mindset so that you can be able to truly formulate your team, build and shape that culture that you want?
This sounds like something anyone who's trying to build a big organization in the restaurant world, and probably any company, I think it starts with you have to know yourself. So I mean, you got to take the assessment yourself to know what your natural tendencies are going to be.
Yeah.
And in that way, and I'd imagine there's probably a lot of people who are listening to this who probably don't even know that. They don't even know what kind of...
They don't know. They're not self-aware of how they are naturally wired.
Yeah.
And notice that I keep putting emphasis on natural because a lot of people think that these assessments are built off of what we think. And I'm not the brain and the think tank behind the design of this tool. This is a system and a scientific tool that has been researched and cross-referenced amongst thousands and thousands of individuals who may just be all wired naturally very similar, right? And that's what you're going up against it's you. It's nothing, anything that I've done to kind of plug in there. I just want to know, who are you? Are you self-aware? And if not, bow. And I also walk through the exercise and I get them to highlight, hey, tell me the parts where you're like, this thing is kind of spot on.
Well, at your 2 Chick-fil-A's, we're just doing the math of average unit volumes. You're effectively running 4.5 McDonald's. It's the equivalent. So that's a sizable organization that you're at right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got to imagine just a tool like this has been game changing for you. Moving inside the 4 walls, I know you got to meet Truett Cathy.
Yeah.
And he said something to you that you're in the hospitality business when you're operating Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Has that conversation changed your approach to leadership at any point, or is this just something in the back of your mind?
Yeah, it has. Me coming into the Chick-fil-A ecosystem holistically has completely shifted how I thought and how I approach servant leadership. Truett has said many of things, as well as his children. Dan, Bubba, Trudy. And some of the phrases that just kind of sticks out, Truett used to always say, hey, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. We're not just in the chicken business, we're in the people business, right? When you hear those types of things, it just resonates differently when you think about this goes beyond just serving a chicken sandwich and waffle fries and delicious milkshake, right? This is truly about powerful influence, right? And stewardship, again, goes back to our corporate purpose, to glorify God, right? By being a good steward and, having a positive impact and influence on everyone that we come into contact with. That's what it is about. And I truly believe that. I mean, meeting Truett several years ago, that was the essence that I encountered when meeting him. I mean, and at this time he was in his 80s and still coming to the corporate office. Even when you interact, every year we do this annual Chick-fil-A convention where all of the owners and their spouses and staff, 10,000 plus people, right? That's fully funded by the Cathy family. Amazing, just the level of hospitality, the resources that we are exposed to, thousands of dollars that I would have to go and pay for if I wanted to invest in those types of services and resources for myself, completely funded by the Cathy family.
Inside the restaurant, and I understand why. I'm disappointed because I thought it was so awesome to be able to see when you gave me that tour of the back of the house.
Yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't been in the back of a fast food restaurant, never mind a Chick-fil-A doing some of the highest volumes out there, I mean, I was like, wow, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have people breading the chicken. The chicken's going to the fryers. You have the fries being cooked. I remember someone was on a catering line making a bunch of salads.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there's timers going for a product that was sitting in, I'm saying product, which is funny because the McDonald's CEO is getting roasted on Twitter for calling his the Big Archer product, but I digress. But that's what I'm calling it. You have product in the heating, it was waiting basically. It's getting filled for orders that are coming in.
Yeah.
Can you just talk through how do you prepare, or your leaders in the stores prepare someone who's never worked in that environment? Like, where do you start? Because to me, I've never worked in a fast food restaurant. I've talked to a lot of owners and operators, but it's a lot going on, man.
It is. And I think, again, this is another differentiator between, those who think that they're just getting a off-the-shelf ready type playbook versus those high executing excellent operators who know how to put together systems and processes to make things run effectively and efficiently. And so over the years, my team and I have been able to refine and create and develop our own kind of training system. And that takes time. That's not something that we built overnight. So typically for us, we try to give everyone about a 30-day process. And that's about 4 weeks of training before we just release you on your own. It is a assessment that is factored into that, right? It's not one of those things where, you failed the assessment, you're out of the organization. It gives us an opportunity. If you don't quite hit the benchmark, where do we need to go back, reevaluate, reassess, and retrain?
And this is just this could be like anyone applying for the lowest role in the store.
Yep.
It's 30 day. You're giving them a 30-day training program.
We're giving them a 30-day a 30-day training program for them and that's online training, that's in-person training, on-the-job training. It's a combination of all of that.
Will you hire someone within a couple of days, a week, or no? Like, it has to be through that 30-day. They have to go through that 30-day process first. I guess what I'm asking here is and I would imagine there are fast food companies or just individual franchisees where they need a position filled. They're going to interview you. If you pass the test, you're right. Like, you don't seem like a total lunatic. It's probably like, hey, put on a shirt, get on the front line. Like, I need a worker now.
Yeah. No, we don't do that.
Yeah.
and I can't say that some other organizations, they may take that approach, but that's not our approach because one, turnover cost can be very high.
Yeah.
Right. We all know that food and labor are your two biggest expenses in the restaurant space. And so we're making an investment. We are truly making an investment when we're making the decision to bring you on board. And so it would be very advantageous for us to make sure that we're creating programs and systems that are supportive of your learning and your development.
Can you talk about what you're able to offer even the lowest member of the team from a total let's call it benefit standpoint.
Yeah.
Because I remember you said to me that you have people who apply from New Jersey to work at your Chick-fil-A's, which I thought was crazy because that's far to get from Jersey to Brooklyn.
And again, shout out to our leadership team. We have a very good internal referral program. And a lot of people like to come work at places where they actually enjoy it, right? They are building friendships. I have team members who have been just regular team members for 6 years in my organization. And in the quick service space, that is a rarity. And that is a credit to how intentional we are, right? It goes back to that O in our love. And our benefits offering is actually called our love offering, right? And offer opportunities to grow stability and exposure to new life experiences. And again, through me sitting down, having conversations with my team members, I think that also blows my team members' mind is they get to spend time with the owner. Who I remember working in a McDonald's franchise and never knew who the franchise owner was. Never spent time with them making sandwiches on the line, right? And that's powerful and impactful for these younger team members or just people in general that it's like, nah, my owner, he's here. He's in it. He's in the fire with us. And so I did a little numbers crunching because shout out to this organization, Impact Brooklyn. So last week I had an opportunity to receive an impact award for just the impact that my team and I have been able to have in the community. And imposter syndrome, that question comes up. I was like, me? Well, why me? And so when I actually ran back the numbers over the last 7 years that we've been present in Brooklyn, I think about just the economic impact that we've been able to have. Over $24 million paid in economic wages to the average 250 team members that we employ annually, right? Over $10 million generated in tax revenue, for the city of New York. $1.5 million plus in healthcare benefits, educational assistance, scholarships, housing stipends. None of those things that I had to offer, right? But I think back to offer opportunities of growth, stability, exposure to new life experiences. We talk about leadership. One of my right-hand men is the recipient of free housing because of the opportunity that I came across to purchase an apartment building, and now he gets to live in New York for free.
Holy crap.
I get to make those type of decisions as an owner-operator, right? Again, opportunities to grow, opportunities for stability, exposure to new life experiences. That is what it's about for me. I'm very big on education, and education it doesn't always have to show up in the form of a traditional education. If you want to go and get your trade, how can we make that happen, right? Even when you think about the immigrant community and giving them the opportunities, I think about some of the team members that work for us. And I remember I had a team member that she cried her eyes out because I have an offsite office, right? And oftentimes that's where we go to do our training. And I'm teaching them, hey, here's how you read a P&L. Here's how you read a food cost report, right? Here's how you read and calculate labor. I remember walking her into that office and she cried her eyeballs out because she said the only time that I've been in an office space was to clean one.
Wow.
No one ever gave me an opportunity to be in a setting like this. No one thought of me higher enough to be in a setting like this. That is why I do what I do.
So the whole your philosophy, the love philosophy, you're backing it up with real.
Yeah, and not to cut you off, but I think about even the benefits that we were able to roll out with this year. Now, all of my team members have direct access to telehealth services. Most importantly, mental health services that cost them nothing.
Yeah.
That costs them nothing. And it's not even just for them. It's for individuals in your household as well. $0. I am buying that. I am investing in that.
That is unheard of in QSR.
Again,
very rare.
We don't have to do it, but that is the opportunity that I've been given to be a good steward over. And like I said, we're not a perfect organization. Not every team member that comes through our doors with us for a lifetime. Yeah. Even if you're just with us for a short amount of time, all that we ask is that you give it your all while you're here, and that's it. And we'll do the same.
Transitioning to like maybe the technical side of the ops, when he gave me that tour. And if you're watching this on YouTube, just to call out, wasn't able to record this for Chick-fil-A's proprietary ops purposes. So apologies that you don't get to see it. But
all of the magic behind the scenes that go on. Yeah.
But I've heard of other brands, and I watched an interview of the Raising Cane CEO talk about how for their chicken tenders and for their fries, there's a certain amount of time. And it was like between 6 and 15 minutes, I think, for each product. If someone doesn't order it and it's not, given to a customer, they throw it out or donate it.
Yeah. We have very similar practices. And I think that we're in a restaurant industry. Food, quality and taste. That is what is of utmost importance. Right? Yeah. Quality and taste. And so because of that, you have to have certain parameters and metrics and guardrails set into place. So all that magic that you speak of that was happening behind the scenes, I'm a beneficiary of partnering with a brand like Chick-fil-A, who has a very robust, innovative tech team and food scientist team to help us think through those type of systems, even if it's the use of AI to help us pull real-time data from the POS to translate that to, this is how many, chicken sandwiches that we project that you're going to sell within the next how many ever minutes, right? And so we're leveraging those type of tools and resources to help us provide the highest and best quality possible of food to our guests. So that is all of the, the magic that you get to see behind the scenes, all the way from us leveraging, again, AI type software to help us predict inventory needs. I think about the smaller independent restaurant owners who may not be in a position to have or leverage some of those type of tools and resources. But me buying into a particular franchise, that's just one of the benefits that comes with it.
So do you have it dialed in as far as what the system's telling you to where you have to order X amount of chicken at a certain point because it's like, hey, at Tuesday at 1 p.m., we're going to get this many orders.
Yeah, for sure. So we do have technologies with those capabilities and features to kind of help our team navigate through, hey, how much should we be producing in terms of food? And again, it's all derived and driven by how do we provide the freshest, hottest quality food to our guests? Yeah.
Incredible.
And I think that is, we're here talking about Chick-fil-A Mythbusters, right? You got an opportunity to kind of see the hard work that goes behind the scenes and every day what our team members are doing. So when we're talking about fresh hand-breaded chicken sandwiches, toasted butter bun with 2 pickles, that's happening real time. I'll joke around with my mom. I'm like, let's see, is that Truett's recipe you're making or is that your recipe you're making? It's just because we're not getting the pre-frozen things off the truck like people already think it is. And no, there's a whole process where we're getting it. We are actually filleting chicken inside of the restaurant.
I saw it.
This is fresh, real products that produce, our salads, those salads that you're thinking about. We're chopping those, we're chopping the lettuce. We're slicing the tomatoes. A lot of these things is happening in the restaurant.
I mean, it's almost like just this choreography of preparation occurring back there. It was cool to see.
And we're so that tour, that behind the scenes tour that I gave you, I actually offer that same type of experience to my leadership candidates. And you know why? It's because I want them to know what it is that you're going to be getting your hands into.
Yeah.
Because this is not, people have this, everybody wants to be a fan of Chick-fil-A, right? They got this googly haloed vision of like, oh yeah, man, it's like the Disney World of fast food. until you got to get on the other side of the counter and now you're responsible for producing that experience. It changes the whole game. And so I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to know what you're getting yourself into before you say I do.
All right, man. Well, this has been a great conversation. I think we've covered as much as we could about Chick-fil-A.
Do you think we've been able to, like demystify all of the myths out there about, Chick-fil-A? I mean, what are some other common myths? Like, oh, do you have to be a, Christian or a person of faith? No. I've had an opportunity to serve alongside, other owners and operators who are non-believers, people that are Muslims. I think when it comes to that, if you're ever considering the Chick-fil-A opportunity as a franchise opportunity for you, we talked about this earlier, the best way is to get firsthand experience and knowledge. And the best source that you could possibly get that from is, one, making sure that they subscribe to podcasts like this, Empires, right? But reach out to your local owner operator. There's a lot of information, both real information and misinformation out there about Chick-fil-A. And as I stated earlier, our business model is a very unique one, and either it is for you or it is not.
My closing question for everyone is, who is a person that's played a big part of your success in life, but maybe doesn't get the credit they deserve?
I appreciate that. It's a hard one for me to answer, because there have been multiple people who in my life that I feel like don't get as much credit as they should. Shout out to the truth tellers that hold me accountable and that don't just call me out, but they know how to call me up, which is a concept that I talk about in my upcoming book. And what I mean by that is those truth tellers are the ones that they've seen the level of excellence in which they've known me to operate. And when I'm not always hitting the mark, they know how to tap in and or say, hey, Brandon, are you all right? Are you okay? How can I help redirect you? Right? And that showed up in the form of a mentor who once approached me and said, stop allowing people to reduce you by the way that you dress and how well you articulate yourself in the corporate setting. And I'll get them to change the narrative to how well you can run a multi-million-dollar business enterprise. Truth teller.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, no one had ever pointed that out. Right? Shout out to my family who knows how to hold me accountable and reach out to me. My mom, who's one of my biggest advocates. And oftentimes when I'm pressured or I'm feeling like I'm battling against imposter syndrome, right? And there's just something about a mother's love that they always know what to say at the right time in the right moment.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm appreciative for those unsung heroes because there are many people in my life that do that. So I'm just grateful and appreciative.
Amazing. So yeah, the people who know you well and know when you're maybe off center to a degree and can help get you back on the right path.
Yeah.
Well, I know you mentioned your book, so for everyone listening and watching, we'll have Brandon's all the links to his socials, his website, so you can follow along his journey and get in touch with him if you want to. And yeah, man, this has been a fun conversation. I think we'll I'm a believer, man. So once you get that third store, maybe we'll run it back and do a part 2 for this conversation.
Awesome. I would appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. This has been a great and amazing conversation.
Hey guys, I'm here with a few thoughts and reactions to that conversation after re-listening to it. So that was the longest podcast I've ever recorded. The raw interview file was actually over 2.5 hours. I feel like there's a lot of misinformation about Chick-fil-A, so I purposefully dedicated the first portion of this episode to asking Brandon about how their operating agreement actually works. And you heard it straight from him. I'll just rattle it off. It truly does cost just $10,000 to get started. Corporate takes 15% of revenue and then half the profits. You don't have to be a Christian to be an operator. The average freestanding location has 80 employees, and you don't have to be in your store every single day. If you can achieve the results they expect, you're not forced to be there, which is why, as Brandon said, right, 20% of operators are able to own 2 stores, And there's a rare 2% of operators who own 3 stores. I also really liked what Brandon said about people who think they want to own a Chick-fil-A, that his first question to them is, well, do you want to own a restaurant? He clearly has a passion and appreciation for the Chick-fil-A brand itself, but he's also all in on being a restaurant owner. And I think that's partially why he was even able to get a second one in the first place, because he's committed to the restaurant operations. All in all, Brandon's whole story was super inspiring for me. He's really made his way up from humble beginnings and has created a great life for himself. And it's a great demonstration of why the Chick-fil-A model, I would say, is super underrated. Because anytime this conversation comes up on social media, I feel like everyone loves to talk about how, oh, you don't own equity. But you heard what Brandon said. How would he have had the money to become a franchise owner of a big QSR brand? Could he have maybe scrapped his way into some cash just to get enough for a down payment for an SBA loan? Yes, I'm sure he could have, but that path obviously comes with an insane amount of risk and hardship. And Brandon's path with Chick-fil-A came with just a $10,000 franchise fee. While he doesn't own equity, I ran some numbers, and he operates 2 locations that he said are on par or better than the freestanding average, which last year that was about $9.3 million in revenue. So let me be clear before I go any further. This is me purely speculating just to prove a point to some degree. This did not come from Brandon, but we know that the average profit margin in fast food is about 10%. At the volume a Chick-fil-A store is doing, it's likely far higher than that, given how far past your fixed costs you are. But let's just be super conservative and say that a Chick-fil-A location's profits after the royalty taken is about 12%. So on $9.3 million in revenue per store, Chick-fil-A corporate gets just under $1.4 million as their 15% royalty on the revenue. And that means there's about $7.9 million before profit. So again, I went with a conservative 12% profit margin, which means there's about $950K in profit, and half of that goes to the operator. So that's $475K. And Brandon has 2 stores, so theoretically, again, I'm just speculating, but theoretically, he could easily be earning $950K or more per year at the moment. Now, that is an incredibly high income. The vast majority of individuals in any industry or field will never make that kind of money on an annual basis. And Chick-fil-A has given that opportunity to Brandon with virtually no risk outside of the opportunity cost on his time. So it's just something to consider. I obviously love the multi-unit true ownership model of most franchisees I have on this show, but the Chick-fil-A model is also amazing in its own way. And for plenty of people, I really think it would be foolish to turn down that kind of upside that it can bring. And as Brandon explained, he's able to use it to own real estate and make other investments. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. And if you want to get in touch with Brandon, you can do so via the link in the show notes. It's to his website. Through there, you can subscribe to his newsletter, get access to all his resources, including the 5 seasons of leadership, which he talked about in this episode. I highly recommend following him and staying tagged into what he's up to. And yeah, so if you're listening to this on audio only, this is another episode that I recorded in person. So the YouTube version has great production value. Please subscribe to Empire's podcast there if you haven't yet. And I'll see you on the next episode.